Our speaker tonight is Mike Kehoe. I've known Mike and his wife Kathy for many, many years, 20 years probably, easy. They live in Strasburg, technically, but they really live out on Coal Mine Road, pretty far out of town. And Mike's career, you have to do something to make money, was he was town manager of Stevens City. But his avocation has been archaeology. And I think probably most of you saw that great article that Ashley Miller wrote for the NVD that was just wonderful. And told about his interest and how he knew all about that even when he was a young child. And I know his sister is here, and you probably remember some of that digging when you were a little kid too. Always. And I think when 81 was being built, was under construction, that really uncovered a lot of stuff. A lot of digging happened. And that had everything to do with the archaeology bug. So I think that in Ashley's article, the thing that blew me away the most was when Mike remarked that people have been here for 10,000 years, and there's things in that soil from 10,000 years ago, maybe. Then the valley hadn't changed much, at least from our perspective, until about the 1960s. And it sure changed things for Mike. So, Mike Kehoe.
Wow, y'all, something's wrong with this crowd coming out on a light night like tonight to hear me. Appreciate it. Hopefully I can entertain you a little bit. I expect when I go through the slide program, it's probably going to take about an hour. I had over 150 photographs, and I've consolidated down to 80, so hopefully it makes sense. One of my biggest struggles are spelling. Did I spell 1,000 right on there? So you might see a couple slides where something's wrong, but it wasn't my fault. Okay, I'm going to start out with this picture right here. It's actually a painting by Carl Brown of Strasburg. Some people would remember Carl. And this painting of the Seven Bins was down at Bosserman's Antique Shop in Maurytown for years and years. And I'd stop in there and I'd look at it. How much you want for it? He said, $50. I wouldn't have paid that. So years go on, and there's a twist to this at the end. So finally, he's retiring, closing up a shop. Must have been 15 years later, maybe more. Went in there and, how much you want for it? $50. He won, I bought it. So next, this program was actually, the basis of it is something I gave a talk on 6, 7 years ago about the archaeological chapter, Northern Virginia archaeological chapter in their scrapbook. And so I had part of this talk already started, so I'm cheating, I'm using that again. But the chapter started in 1963 when I was in 8th grade. Well, I wasn't aware of it until the next year, but they started this scrapbook, and it was organized by Julian Hammond and a lot of the old-time collectors. Here's the charter members. I'm going to read off a couple names. They're pretty familiar to the people from the Strasburg area in Shenandoah County, starting with Lena Arts, Charles Brown, who was Carl Brown, that painter, James Crawford, or Jack Crawford, who was the editor of the Northern Virginia Daily, Mildred Lee Grove, who was from Stevens City, Irvin Haven was from Warren County. I remember these people because I was around them for quite a bit. Aubrey Johnson from Strasburg. Julian Hammond was my mentor. He was the one who got me started collecting arrowheads when I was 6 years old. E. Keister. Everybody should know who E. Keister was. He had the publishing the Northern Virginia Daily and the publishing house in Strasburg. So I'm not going to read the right column, but you could see there was a lot of people interested in local history, just like you all are, started this chapter in 1963, and it had its base was in Strasburg at the old Massanutten Bank. There's Julian Hammond on the left. He was the first president. And many of you still may remember Blair Zirkle, who was Commissioner of Revenue in this county for years and years and years and years. And he was the treasurer. And I got to know both those gentlemen, and they were gentlemen. The fellow in the middle, didn't know him, but he was from Pennsylvania, Vernon Leslie, and he was an archaeologist that was well known in Pennsylvania at the time. In the 1960s, Virginia did not have an archaeologist except at William and Mary. It was Ben McCary, I believe, was his name. And there may have been an archaeologist at UVA, but I'm not certain. That's all there was in the entire state. The Virginia State Library hired an archaeologist because of the interstate system coming in, and they need, federal requirements, I think, where you had to do some basic archaeology, so they hired McCord. And I'll get to him in a minute. But Hired McCord was, he was actually a colonel in the Army, and he learned to do archaeology when he was in Japan. He'd always had an interest in it. But he was an avocational archaeologist that was hired by the state to be the state archaeologist through the Library of Virginia. We'll go back. So in 1964, the interstate was getting ready to cross Cedar Creek. Most of you should be familiar with the location of Fort Bowman, but if you're not, it's right where the interstate crosses Cedar Creek, going north and south, of course. And the old-time collectors knew that was an Indian site really close by. So I'm out in the field one day. I had learned to, goof off and get chores done. I'd go arrowhead hunting out in the fields and cornfields. And back then, everything was plowed. Now you can't find very much at all. It's a good thing because of soil erosion. But back then, all the fields were plowed or tilled every couple of years. And at the end of the rainy season, you could find arrowheads in hot spots all over the place. Pottery, quite a bit. And any farm boy in the valley for decades and decades wound up collecting arrowheads, because back in the old days, when you cut corn, you did it by hand. And remember the fodder, you make fodders and shocks, and they look like the teepees. Well, that was very, very common up through the 1960s. And in the fall, if you went through there after they had cut the corn, you could spot an arrowhead several yards away, because it would be up on a pedestal of dirt, because it had rained all summer, and the arrowhead or whatever, the spear point or whatever, had sort of protected the soil beneath it, so they would stand up. It was really unique to see that. And but you can't see it now. But that was very common, and all the farmers back then were picking up arrowheads when they were cutting corn. So anyway, this was a Bowman site. It was right below Fort Bowman, and it was a late woodland site, meaning that you could find little bitty, teeny, triangular arrowheads about the size of your thumbnail. You had to have pretty good eyesight to see them, but supposedly that was the latest type of point, and actually it was a true arrowhead, or they would blow, like down in South America, what do they call it, blow spear or something like that. Yeah, blow dart, there you go. So that may have been what it was, but you could find them in this field. And so I'm down there one afternoon, and there's this guy in a Jeep pulls up, and he had a hat on that made him look like an archaeologist, and it was Hired McCord. And I think I was 14. He wanted to know what I had found, and I showed him a few arrowheads, and he says, well, we're having a dig over here this coming Saturday. Why don't you come along? So, of course, I was over there that Saturday, right at dawn probably, but we had to cross the creek. And creek is cold in April, but I got across it. had to wait it. In 2 days, this is what was excavated by hand. They had actually, it was in a cornfield. They didn't bother with the topsoil. It had already been plowed. It was called the plow zone. It was already disturbed. And what they did was everybody was given a shovel and a 5x5 square. There was that many people there. And they dug down to the subsoil. And that's where you could see the features that were below grade. So it looks to me, this is the old-time map from the 1960s. Looks like 10 feet's about 3/4 of an inch long or something, but it's about 100 feet long and maybe 40 feet wide. In 2 days, that was done by hand. And that's the only time that site was ever excavated. There's Colonel McCord on the left. And on the right is, let me see, I've got a pointer here. See right there? That's the berm for the northbound lane of 81. And so that's 1964, 2025, they're working on it again finally. And finally. It should have been done a long time ago. So there's the people out in the field. By the way, this scrapbook had other pictures in it that had more graphic scenes of burials. I have not included them tonight for just reasons that it's not appropriate anymore, I'm told, so I'm not showing those. But there were burials in the original photographs, and they were in the newspapers as well. There's the crew, Mr. Crawford. Oops. I'm not going to hit the back button. He told me bad things happen, but there's Jack Crawford, Colonel McCord. There's my brother Sam. There I am. I reckon I know some of these people. I think that's Lanier Rogers. But anyway, McCord's giving instructions on what to do. And there's probably a couple features down there where those arrows point to. And this is out of the newspaper, Northern Virginia Daily. Of course, guess what? The publisher and the editor, there was all kinds of publicity back then about these excavations going on that the Northern Shenandoah chapter was doing, which, by the way, is still in existence. It's in Winchester now, based in Winchester, but it's just a small group of people. I'm not a member of it at the present time. There's some more pictures. Everybody got their hands dirty. It was fun. This is my brother Sam right there. So, here we are. I'm 14. I'm the oldest. So there's my younger brother, who was probably 10. And then something's always been strange about this picture. See in the back, that guy walking around like this, 1964. Hank said maybe he's a time traveler. I don't know. That's Peachy Rinker, who became a surveyor, and he was on the Strasburg Council for years. It's 2 days of a lot of hard work and fun. And probably changed my life.
Which one was you?
Pardon?
Which one was you in the other picture?
Oh, that's me right there. All right, so in December '64, this quarterly bulletin came out. It's a publication that the Archaeological Society, or ASV, does every 4 times a year, supposedly. And they were pretty regular back then, but the report about the Fort Bowman site came out that fall, or that December. And it had a few pictures of the items that were found in there. There's bone artifacts. That's part of a shell for the turtle that they would have used for a cup. These are antler points that they use for arrows, tips. There's a fishing hook, awls, and part of a pipe bowl. But that's just a few of the things that were found. there's some pottery. The pottery that was found was called Kaiser Cordmark, and it's a Page County origin by the name. It's a Kaiser Farm site, and it was contemporary with the Bowman site and the Molly site. And supposedly by typology, it's the latest known pottery of the woodland period in the Shenandoah Valley. So I never heard the carbon dating on this site. I know they got it, but I never heard what it was until a few years ago. Carol Nash of James Madison University said that it was probably the latest date in the valley as far as a village site, circa 1700. So that's just a few years before Height and the Europeans start showing up. And one of the reasons I think that they may have settled there, you saw Bowman's Fort in the background, the fields were still cleared. There was agriculture going on. It was probably in some secondary growth, but it was just much easier for them to get right to work and plow the fields and get into their crops right away. Didn't have to go out and cut down a forest. So the next year is 1965. The site was the second one done in Shenandoah County. The Bowen site has a number SH44SH1, which is state of Virginia's 44, Shenandoah County, number 1. That was the first site excavated in Shenandoah County, the Bowman site. This is number 2 the following year. And that's Mr. Lanier Rogers, who many of you may remember. He lived in Maurytown for years, and he was also a pilot. So the Molly site is on the bend of one of the bends of the Shenandoah River, and right down here is a long bend, not too far from Black Bear Crossing. It's a little bit controversial right now because the site's still there, but there's talk about development there. All right, Mr. Rogers, Lanier Rogers, spotted these circles as he's coming in. You see the plane in the background is a strip landing. Right there is an airplane. And they would land in this field. Well, it was a dry year, and he's coming in, and he noticed these crop circles. Can you see them? Okay. And here's one that's square. This is a square circle. And it dawned on him that it was a village site. I think it was known that people had found, prehistoric artifacts there when it was plowed, but it hadn't been for years because of the airplane, strip landing. He's standing in the middle of one right now. Turned out he was right. What those circles are, when you put in a teepee or a wigwam or whatever, you have poles that are drove in the ground, and they make a hole in the ground, and that hole stays there forever. It will fill with topsoil, and when you have a dry year, it's deeper, and moisture will go to that circle or those places and create a circle like that. A lot of people call them fairy rings. Some of them are by fungus and whatever, but I think a lot of them are from features like this. So I call them wigwam circles. So the chapter got involved with the excavation, and it turned out to be a village site, a big village site. In fact, it's the largest village site, to my knowledge, ever excavated in the Shenandoah Valley. A lot of information came from this particular site. It was 40-some years, almost 50 years ago. 50 years ago, 60 years ago, my golly. What I was talking about, the moisture collecting to the where the poles were in the ground, that's where the topsoil would, when you pull it out or leave it in place, the organic material would go there. It would be softer, and it shows up as a darker stain. And right here is a pit that was dug and backfilled, and that's why you can see it below the subsoil or below the surface and into the topsoils, because it was disturbed and it was filled with topsoil. So that's why it's darker. And they call them stains. And here's one of the post molds right there. All right, I was in high school. I did not participate in this particular dig because I didn't have any way to get there. I remember I walked across the creek when I was 14. When I was 15, I couldn't get to Martytown. So I didn't participate in this. But this is a palisaded village, just part of it. Right there, that line right there is the airstrip. So they're not going to excavate where the planes were landing, but they excavated to I think this is the north side of it. You'll see a circle. See that pattern? That was what was in the fields. That was the circles that he was seeing. See the square? It was actually a square wigwam, I guess. And these lines right here, it looks like a double-sided palisade. So, as far as I know, at least in the lower part of the Shenandoah Valley, this is the only village site that has been excavated to this extent. And that was in 1965. There's a little bit more of a close-up. Now, in the close-up, you might see some circles right there, and there, and there. These were the pits that they dug. And what did they have to dig pits with? Sticks and stones. Didn't have a shovel. I mean a flat shovel, you can't dig with. Sticks and stones, and they probably had the kids do it, but at least my dad would have. But in some of these pits, right there and there, I think it says burials. So during the course of a year, there was probably, as life comes and goes, there was people that died. Apparently this culture, whoever they were, did not put people out on a scaffold or whatever you hear about, or didn't put them in mounds. They put them in the pits that were already dug, and their remains are there until they were excavated. And what this means is there's other villages all over, up and down the valley, along the rivers, all along the creeks, where there's human remains still. Now this dated 1600s, probably 15 to 1600s. The soils in Virginia are acidic. Human remains really don't last that long, but they'll last maybe 700, 800 years, 1,000 years. After that, we're all dust. So there's the other part of the palisaded village. A lot of information came from this site. And they even reconstructed a wigwam using the post holes, and there's one of the pits right there that they dug. Now the pits were dug for food storage. They didn't have refrigerators, but sometime in early woodland period, somebody figured out that, hey, that makes a good refrigerator. Just dig it, cover it up with leaves or whatever, and they could keep their food there, their perishables for a while. And of course, they were smoking meat and preserving. I don't know if they did much salt. I doubt if they had very much salt to cure meat. Cindy knows about this. This is a headdress made from antlers, and it was probably a ceremonial wear that they had, but it was in one of the pits that they found. And they're actually called trash pits. It's not burial pits, trash pits, because that's where they threw all their garbage, all their pottery, everything was broken, bones, from animals. And there was I'm not certain, but there's a complete necklace with a shell brooch and beads. I think those are clay beads that were found around one of the remains, maybe a chieftain or something, but I've never seen this outside of the picture. And a lot of the artifacts, they don't know where they are now. I think they might be with the Department of Historic Resources. This is what I called it Kaiser Cordmark pottery. This is the type of pottery that they have. This was a bowl that it wasn't that big. They got several gallons in size, but the Bowman site, the site over in Page County, along Kaiser Ridge, and the Molly site were all related by this type of pottery. And I'm often asked, what Indians lived here at that time? Well, we really don't have any knowledge of it except the type of points that they left, the type of pottery that they made, because that was distinctive, and maybe some other things that, features that you might find, but they left no written record except what you find in the ground. That's what I call traces. The Algonquins tribe was here in Virginia, and they claim that this may be their origins, but I'm not certain if they know. Maybe some DNA could be done one of these days. Seems like it should have been done already, but to my knowledge, it hasn't been. You take somebody today that has native blood, and the remains that are at Smithsonian or someplace, and maybe confirm it. That's beyond my knowledge. Okay, and then you find foodstuffs in these pits as well. Remember, the women burned things back then too, and the men. I mean, I eat a lot of burned food at home, but toast. Anyway, the trash pits contained beans. So, they had the three sisters of the beans, corn, and squash were very common at this late woodland period. And they found remnants of all those in these trash pits. And they're charred, and that's why they're preserved. Moving on to 1967, I think there was a project in 66, but I didn't put it on here because I'm going to try to finish up tonight. Panther's Cave is along Cedar Creek, and they decided the chapter decided that would be a good place to excavate. Well, they didn't know that I had already been there. It was my high school science project, and I had gone in that spring and had did a 5-foot unit and went to the class, and I got actually a B- in it because I turned it in late. But that's me. But there's the mouth of the cave. And how many have been to Panther's Cave? Raise your hand. Okay. It's a unique place, and it's owned by the Cedar Creek Battlefield Foundation. And I'm on that board, and I'm trying to get it opened up for tours at some point. I think people ought to know that it's there. It's a really good resource. It's a little difficult to get to unless you're going down the creek. There's Mr. Rogers again, and it seems like he was always involved in these projects. They have a really neat screen that they built, and I wish I knew where it was now, but it was like a swing, and they go back and forth. But when I did my 5-foot square, and Dr. Schaeferman was our teacher, gave me a B-. It was about a foot or two of dirt on the floor of the entire cave. If you go there now, it's bare to stone. And these guys worked that entire summer and cleaned that cave off. And here's the sorry part of this, though. The report is lost. Nobody knows what happened there. All the people involved with this are gone. Except for my report. So we have one 5-foot square that's a record of it. That's how deep it got outside the cave. It's about 5 foot deep. I wish I knew what happened to the artifacts. That's the chapter was really enthusiastic. They were trying to do their best, but they did not keep very good records. And I think that's one thing that has improved over the course of the years. And the society has tried to become more professional and just not go out and dig it willy-nilly. And there's a picture from the inside of the cave out, and that's Cedar Creek in the background. And so people, if you're floating down Cedar Creek or kayaking from Middle Road, you'll pass the cave now. There's several caves along Cedar Creek. I'm speaking mostly of Cedar Creek and the northern Shenandoah Valley or northern Shenandoah River because that's where I'm from and that's where I'm most familiar with. I didn't get down to this part of the county very much, except for Civil War related artifacts. All right, I mentioned that they had cleared off down to the bedrock in the cave. So you'll see all these Masonic symbols. They were here early, All that's been done since 1960. People stopping in, carving their names or images. There's two publications that have been put out that I would think if you want to become familiar, and probably most of you all are pretty versed in what I'm talking about tonight, or I know a lot of you are, but one of the basic books I would recommend is called Lost Arrowheads and Broken Pottery by Bill Gardner, who was the archaeologist from Catholic University, and he led up the Thunderbird excavation in the 1970s on the Flint Run site over in Warren County. So this was published in 1986, and it was a very good, and still is, I think, a very good overview of the archaeology in the Shenandoah Valley. And then the ASV has put out booklets like this about stone tools and different information that has been garnered from all the excavations over the last few decades. And they're available online through the Archaeological Society of Virginia's bookstore. So this is out of Gardner's book. And this sort of blew my mind away when I first read it. Right at the top, 70,000 years ago is the Shenandoah River. Look how wide it was and how shallow it was. And this is right during, before the ice ages. And as the ice melted, the river keeps cutting deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper. And so about 15,000 years ago, it's deeper and wider, but not as deep as it is now. And that's about the time that they've traced humans coming back to, or being in this area is now dated around 15,000 years, I believe. That says BC. I like using BP because it's less confusing. BP meaning before present. If I do my math, I say, well, I don't know, 2,000 plus, oh well, so I just use BP. Then you get to the Archaic period, which are still hunter and gatherers. The first people, they call them Paleo Indians, and they were after the big game, the mastodons, and they had spears and didn't even have spear throws. Everything was on a lancelet, like a big lance. They had beautiful blades. It's called Folsom or Clovis points, and that's pretty much what identifies the sites is just that stone. There's nothing left except the stone. That's it. Makes you wonder about our future, if it's not made of stone. Anyway, Archaic, the river's deeper, and you have more shelves off the side of the river, terraces as they're called, and that's where the villages are being located, or the occupations are on these terraces. Around the woodland period, which is about 3,500 years ago, it's getting deeper. And then by today, this is right here, it's AD, you start seeing a lot of fill, and that's coming from ground being disturbed, farmland, whatever, erosion, and that's filling in these terraces. And it's washing out on one side, filling in on the other. So that's one reason no-till cropping is going on. It's protecting the soil, but you can't find the arrowheads anymore. The thing about that, it's good, very good that we're saving our soil, but the next generations are losing the interest. How do you get interested in something? By participating, by finding something. And if you can't, it's not as many people are as interested. I look around tonight, I see Vance How old are you, Vance? 13. One 13-year-old here. Everybody else is over the hill, I think. Okay. Very good. It's good to see some young folks. And here's a graph put out by the Archaeological Society of Virginia. It sort of goes backwards from the other graph. That went from top down. This goes from bottom up. This is a Paleo period with the Clovis point. Sediment builds up over the land, a few feet. So you can see the Paleo sites. This would be about 16 or 1700. So it's quite a bit of, it's 10 or 12 feet sometimes down along these rivers where the oldest sites are. And at Thunderbird, I think they did get down around 15 feet or 16 feet along the South Fork in places. Other places right on top of the ground because it's eroded off. And this is out of Gardner's book. It's the Shenandoah Valley chronology, starting Paleo period and early Archaic. He says 9,500 BC, so that'd be 11, 12,000 years ago. People were here that long ago. You think about it. Europeans settled this 400 years ago. They were here for 12,000 years. That means a lot of rocks in the ground, a lot of things that they worked on, a lot of chips. I figured it up the other day. I'm going down the road. How many arrowheads were lost in the valley? Let's see. 500 Indians lost one a year for 1,000 years. Well, that's 5 million arrowheads. That's how I think. So it's a lot more than 5 million, believe me. I doubt from all the collectors on all the decades here in the valley, in Shenandoah County, let's just say, if they've even collected 100,000 arrowheads, really, they're out there, they're scattered. And besides when I say arrowheads, I mean points, projectile points or tools, whatever they use. And that doesn't include the lithics. And I'll get to something in a minute about how many lithics there are at the Thunderbird site. This is just a poster I think sort of neat, and it breaks it down into 3 different time periods. The Paleo period, which you can just evidence is just by the projectile point. The Archaic has a different type of point, and they're starting to get into pottery and different types of tools and notch points, which they had the spear throwers at that time, or atlatls. And that went on for centuries, or thousands of years. And it wasn't until, I'm going to guess about 1,500 years ago that they actually had the bow and arrow, something like that. So that technology took a long time to catch up. But what's interesting, in Europe, it sort of parallels, So you've got Europe, Stone Age people here. Somehow I wonder if there wasn't something connecting them. I don't know. Just word of mouth, couldn't call them. So, and the late woodland period, they started having, of course, crops and stationary places to live until all the resources ran out. And I was told that village sites would be abandoned after a while, after all the game is gone, after the soil's exhausted, after the trees are cut down, and they would move to another site. And then about 200 years later, all that's been reestablished, and here they come back. And they'll stay in the same site every 200 or 300 years. It might be reoccupied again during the woodland period. So a site, village site can be used 3 or 4 different times during the woodland period. This is a depiction, I think, of the village that was Powhatan's village down on the York River, and it was called Wahansonica. And in the background, I've been to the site. It's not open to the public, but the National Park Service now has this site, and it will be open to the public hopefully in the near future. It's really interesting. They're getting the museum going. But in the background is the largest longhouse that was ever excavated. It's about 40 or 50 feet long. And so it's still there to be seen. I went there for one of the ASV conferences. It was sort of a special trip to go see that. But it should be open one of these days, now that we've reopened the government. Okay, I'll be quiet. And this is the Thunderbird site that they actually built another wigwam, and I really like this view. It looks very paleo, but it's close to the Thunderbird site. In the 70s, the Thunderbird was a big thing here in the valley, and National Geographic actually sponsored Bill Gardner and Catholic University on that excavation. And it turned up the oldest known living or wigwam or housing site in the entire U.S. Up to that time. I don't know if it still may be, but it goes back 12,000 years. It's just south of Front Royal on the South Branch. It's near what's called Flint Run. And the property has been preserved, but nearby, it would be housing now if it hadn't been preserved by the Archaeological Conservancy. What made that site, people aware of that site, was Julian Hammond and hired Colonel Hiram McCord, and Lanier Rogers went over to the site because Mrs. Wilkerson had been finding fluted points in that area. They didn't believe her. They didn't believe her because Mrs. Wilkerson, I knew her. She could embellish a little bit. Let's put it that way. But she was telling the truth, and they found a site where the Indians were finding. And I don't use the word indigenous. I'm sorry. I can't remember it very often, so I just say Indians. I hope that's okay with everybody. But they were walking along Flint Run upstream, and McCord saw just a piece of this blade sticking out of the embankment. And he took his knife and wiggled it out, and it turned out it's called the McCord Jasper biface. Very, very, very rare. And it's disappeared, but at least there's a sketch of it. There's probably some pictures somewhere. Anyway, McCord contacted Catholic University, and they were able to come out and do a decade-long excavation there. And a lot of the archaeologists now were trained during that time period at Thunder. They call it Thunderbird Ranch, our Thunderbird site, because there was a hunting lodge there called Thunderbird. Okay, there's the Jasper. Now, a few years ago, Lanier Rogers, before he passed away, showed me the site. And it's sort of a secret thing. You don't tell everybody, but he showed it to me. That boulder is as big as it looks. It would maybe fit into the back of a pickup truck. I certainly couldn't lift it, but that is Jasper. And a couple of our chapter members, I don't see them here tonight, we had a field trip there one day, and this rock formation on the right was covered up by leaves, and we swept it off, and you can see the different colors of jasper. It was almost purple, brown, green, orange. So that's why jasper points are so colorful, and it's really good stone. It works really well, and it was a favorite of the Indians to utilize. And they would come from probably states away for this form of rock because it was so good. Well, it was in private hands, and guess what? It's for sale, like everything. And so they go in, push a road in for this subdivision, and all the jasper boulders that were laying on the surface for thousands of years are pushed into a sinkhole. And there's the for sale sign. Well, it's a good thing I went over there because nobody else seemed to know do anything about it or whatever. So I talked to the state archaeologist, and we were able to, the state came up with a $5,000 grant to do some preliminary work if they could get permission to go in on this is called the quarry site. If you look at it, you probably can't see from the distance, but this boulder right here was notched, was worked on, and they were knocking slabs of jasper off. And now it's down in a sinkhole. Anyway, the state was able to come up with $5,000. Thunderbird Archaeology, which was actually based in Woodstock for a long time, they're now in Manassas and part of another firm, they got the bid. And so I was able to help them work on a couple days out there on the site, at the quarry site. And we just put in 3x3 squares, and two of them, 2 squares, just preliminary work. Hot, my golly, it was in May, it's really hot, ticks were out, everything. And my square, it was about a foot deep, 16, and it had some flakes in it. But the square that was about 25 yards away, 3 feet deep, 2.5 feet deep, they had 5-gallon buckets of jasper chips came out of that. They had to go to Lowe's to buy more buckets. They found some bifaces in there. That's how deep that layer of jasper rock that they were chipping away was. And of course at the bottom is supposed to be the oldest. So now, thanks to the publicity, the property actually was bought by a fellow from Roanoke who's in the State Archaeological Society, and they are actually excavating over there now. So hopefully, Mike Johnson's the archaeologist, and I'd say he's probably one of the least or best known or lead paleoarchaeologists in the state of Virginia and the East. All right, going back to close to where I live, one I guess it was right after Christmas. It was after Christmas dinner. I need to go out for a walk, just get some fresh air. I walked across the road and I noticed the woods they'd timbered the woods. And I'm walking down, if I see bare dirt, I want to walk on it. And I walk down the road and I start seeing flakes. It's just right across from my house, and it's in hardwoods, that's never been plowed. I call it the buyer's site. And I start finding artifacts and lithics, and next thing I know, I find this nice point right here. And that's pretty good for Christmas Day. So over the next couple of months into the spring, I got permission from the property owner just to excavate because it was going to be disturbed anyway. So I went in there and put a couple little test units in, and I found something pretty interesting. All these little things are where chips are laying in the ground, but then I found this round dark spot, and I found an iron pestle, sort of like bell-shaped. I found one of those, and I found a hand axe that was broken in half, but I found both pieces to it. So this is only a couple of inches down underneath the surface. That's all. The soil has changed there since 5,000 years, I guess. But anyway, I did dig out that little dark spot, and I found some pieces of pottery in it. And I think that might be from an really early archaic site. So that might be some of the earliest pottery that's been found. I need to get with a professional about that. So for right now, I'm just going to show you around my neighborhood where we have found things, just by walking around looking, always looking. Sometimes you need to look up to. Beautiful point, and it's about 3 inches long. My daughter was with me one day, and we weren't looking for arrowheads. We were actually looking for a cemetery over in Frederick County. It was called the Ball Cemetery, and supposedly it's a black cemetery. President Obama gave posthumously a Medal of Honor to this soldier named Charles Ball, I think, World War I. And no one knew where his grave was. And I had seen the Ball Cemetery way up on this ridge one time, and I thought I'd look for it. Couldn't find it the second time. But as I'm walking up the road, my daughter's with me. She's here tonight. She says, "Look what you just walked over." See right there? There it is. It's a stone axe. Yep, I walked over it. I was looking up in the air, see? There it is. Now, what is unique about this to me, you see the grooves on the right? Oops. See the grooves there? So this would be an archaic, this would be about 7,000, 8,000 years old perhaps. You've got grooves there, and over here it's not grooved. What that tells me, that stone laid on the surface all those years, and this is weathered. That's how long it was exposed to the elements. And that was never saw daylight till she picked it up. And then I looked around, and there's a Savannah River point just a few yards away. Now, we have not been back to this site. It's probably a good site. It's been recorded, though, but it's being protected. Can you all see that fella? Little green snake, and he was there. Sort of a neat place. It really was. You sort of get a feeling when you're there. After a while, you could just tell what sites where you can find things and where you can't. You just, for some reason, you just become accustomed to it. And I think most people that look for artifacts have learned that. All right, moving on down to this part of the county, the Seven Bends. I got this out of one of the publications. And it's not very clear, particularly if you're in the back, but Indian mounds were fairly common along the Shenandoah River, going back to about 2,500 years ago to about the time of Christ. There was a 700 or 800 year period where the Indian mound culture, which I don't want to call it, were prominent in the valley. And it sort of ends east of here. You get into Page Valley, you'll see some, but then beyond the Blue Ridge, you just don't find them. You find them more from the South Fork west into West Virginia and into Ohio. So whatever culture it was had an influence coming from the Midwest this way. It's hard to say, people migrate, climate changes, people move, go, have always done that. There may have been periods where the area was void of human contact or occupation. So there probably have been multiple cultures over the thousands of years of our history here in the valley. I mean, we've been here 400 years. Look how, can you imagine? This is a location that I found over in Clark County, Berry's Ferry on Route 50. I was actually metal detecting, and I was on this ridge looking for Civil War stuff, and I came across an Indian mound. It's what I call it, a rock cairn. And it was about 3 feet high. It's one of the bigger ones I've come across, 3 feet high and maybe 20 feet circumference. It was just a pile of rocks. But Mr. Rogers moved to Stephen City, near Rogers, and he would come to the High Point truck stop when I worked there, and I'd go over and talk to him in the afternoons. And I was telling him about this place. And he says, well, I'd like to see it. Now, bear in mind, he's 88, 90 years old then. So we go over there one afternoon, not during work, but went over there. And he walked right up that ridge, must be 100 feet high, got up there, and he started looking around. He says, there's a point here. There's a point here. And I said, really? And he started looking around the base of trees, and within a couple minutes, he'd found a nice spear point. He just knew what to look for. This mound, and most of them have been disturbed. A lot of them were disturbed in the late 1800s, 1890s to 1910 by the Smithsonian. They had people going out doing what they thought was best at the time. In fact, the Smithsonian is filled with objects from this time period because people were paying them. People started going out and digging in the graves, and they would sell them for money to the Smithsonian or other museums. So a lot of these Indian sites, and I think they're, today you can't do that, first of all, but it wasn't thought as a bad thing at the time. It was a way to make some money, and it was curiosities. So, visited some mounds over in Page County. It's called Indian Grave Ridge, and it says that on the topo map. It's not a secret. And some friends of mine who were here tonight had horses, and they said they'd been up there and had seen it. And I said, well, I'd sure like to go. And so a few weeks later, they gave me old Skipper, the horse I'm riding on right there, and we went up 4 miles up that trail. The time I got up there, I wish I hadn't, wasn't as bad going up, though, as coming down. But when I got up there, it was really worth it. And there's rock cairns up there. I've never seen such a complex. It must have been for centuries. It must have been a burial ground for centuries for these people, at least for 500 or 600 years. And their villages would have been down along the South Fork of the river, and they would have carried the people up there and buried them. And it must have been significant for some reason, but usually when I come across the Indian mounds, it's a place where there's vistas, where you can look out and see a broad view. And that's one of and on a point. And so maybe if this woods was cleared, I could see better what they were looking at. But I can predict, and I found several Indian mounds just by looking for them in certain places, I think where they might be. There's a couple other views. And of course, maybe you can see it, but see, it was dug out. Here's my friend Larry Alamong, and he and I have been doing this for a long time. He says, Mike, did you ever see the ones at Tom's Brook? I said, no. He says, well, I know there's 2 of them there. So a couple winters ago, we went over there to Tom's Brook, and he knew about the location, but he couldn't remember exactly where it was. It was 20 years before. So he's way up on a hill looking, and we're scouting around. I finally spot them. These are 2 small Indian mounds or rock cairns. Well, one's at Tom's Brook, and the other one's over at Mountains Falls. The one at Mountain Falls is close to a church, and what's unique about it, it has an outer ring of rocks around it. And this particular mound is in black and white. It's hard for features to show up on film. You can see them, 3-dimensional with your eyeballs, but the camera only is 2-dimensional. So it's hard to show the definitions. But this is on a piece of property that I and my partner, Mark Ludlow, own. Mark is an archaeologist, and I'm a partner with him, and it's called M3 Archaeology. We do a lot of ground-penetrating radar work, by the way. In fact, right now, they're doing some work in Mount Jackson at the Union, what's the cemetery there? Union Church Cemetery. And this is the landform that it's on. It's a ridge that overlooks directly at Signal Knob. So I'm talking about the vistas. So a couple years ago, my friend Charlie Hemmerite, I graduated from high school with him. I can't believe he graduated, but those guys back there know him. He comes up, and Charlie's moved down to, it's on the Eastern Shore, Gloucestershire, someplace down that way. And he says, I'm always looking for airheads. I'm always looking for airheads, and I can't find them. And I thought, well, I'll show you the Indian grave over on the property. So it was in April, and we walked over there, and the leaves had blown away. And I looked down, and daggone, that's not laying right on top. It's a made out of rhyolite. It's a type of stone that comes out of Pennsylvania. And it's equivalent to it's called the Susquehanna point. It's a certain notch shape. It goes back about 2,500 years, 3,000, which is contemporary with the mound there. So it's laying on the surface. And I picked it up, and Charlie couldn't believe it. He thought I'd planted it. But I left it there. And today, I could take you over there and show you. I just felt like it's been there all these years. Just leave it, you know. It's sort of neat to go. But sometimes I can't find it. I've put a cow bone beside it, put a rock beside it, and now I can generally find it pretty well. But it floats with the ground. Sometimes it's almost sunken in the ground, and other times it moves up and down. And believe it or not, it's chipped from the first time I picked it up, so it's fractured a little bit. So not always are arrowheads broken by impact. They might be freezing and thawing. Here's a couple of other points that I've found on the surface. In the woods. Woods are a good place to find them, just not the fields, but if the leaves are blown off, sometimes you'll find them. You look for the chips, look around the base of trees. If you see a chip of some sort, lithic, you might find a point. And Sarah, this is from over in our old woods. Patrick and I call it the men's, that's where the men went, we call it the men's club. They went over there to get away from the squaws. We call it the men's club site because in this woods, we found probably half a dozen or more arrowheads. Perfect. It's also a site of a Civil War encampment. And this is over in Cedar Creek Valley, close to Zepp. I have no idea what this is, but my daughter and I, Bridget, were looking for mushrooms, and I guess it was we would have done that in May, wouldn't it, sometime? And we came across this. But there's all kinds of things out in the woods like this, if you get out in the woods and look for them. So I think this is the north end of Massanutten Mountain or Signal Knob. And there's actually some graves up on top, I've found. But the bottomland is Long Meadows that Height bought. As part of his 100,000 acres or whatever, Joyce Height, part of his patent. And his son built a log home called, I think it was Traveler's Hall or something, in 1740. And their land ran from the mouth of Cedar Creek almost to Front Royal down along the Shenandoah River. And it's just one long field. Well, back in the 60s, it was all plowed. And I would get on my bicycle and I would ride down along the road there and go in these fields. And you could look out way ahead of you in a field and see some dark soil. So there's where you would go. And that was the Indian sites because it was more organic and it was just darker. And usually 9 times out of 10 you could find some pretty neat things in that darker soil. So that's part of the Long property, and the Height property, and it was called Long Meadows. And that's the name of the house there now. All right, this is on property owned by the Shenandoah Valley Battlefields and National Park Service as part of the Cedar Creek Battlefield National Park. And what do you see there in the foreground? Crop circle. There's 2 of them there. I've told them about it, but it has to be certain conditions that you see them. And then the field on the right is to the right of this. And that was one of the most prolific fields I ever hunted in my life for arrowheads. And it had some really, really, really good arrowheads in there, old stuff. Kirk points, things that are 8,000, 9,000 years old. And it's right across from the Bowman site, which is where we had the excavation. So this area is all rich in prehistory. And Civil War, too. I was doing both. Anyway, this land is preserved. It's now part of the national park. And if you all haven't been to the Cedar Creek National Park, I would invite you to go. It's based in Middletown. They've got a lot of trails It's not just about the Civil War, too. My first airhead, found it when I was 6 years old. And that's what got me started. I found it in the garden. And these are some other airheads. And then on that picture I just showed you, this is soapstone pottery. So that's late archaic. Before they had pottery, they had baskets, of course. But for vessels, they would find soapstone. I think the quarries are over in Loudoun County. There might be some on the other side of it, like over in the Rappahannock area, Rappahannock County. On the east of the Blue Ridge, you can find soapstone quarries. And they would carry that over here. And some of the bowls would be huge. And they would, from what I understand, they would bury them. They wouldn't carry them from place to place. They would leave them at a spot and then come back and forth and leave them there. So anyway, I found in this particular place, which was near that crop circle, I found 4 or 5 shards there, along with what's called Savannah River points, and this is a late woodland point. So these are all points from when I was maybe 8 or 10 years old. And the first point is a McCorkle type, and it goes back 9,200 years maybe. That's the range. All right. In 1937, the U.S. or Virginia or the U.S. government had aerial flights taken over. 30,000 feet, something like that. They were up there. They were up real high. But you can zoom in on them. And when I did that on the right, you'll see this field right here. See those dark stains? That's that dark soil I was talking about from organic occupation. They would throw out their fat, their scraps or whatever. I guess they went to the bathroom, whatever. It was fertilized, enriched soil. So the soils are darker where there's human occupation. Also, this was taken in 1937, and you may not be able to see it, but if I zoomed in on it more, well, let's go to the next slide. There's the dark stain. And then you see these little dots here. This is taken in October of 1937. Those are corn shocks, all perfectly in alignment. Any photograph, any aerial photograph in Shenandoah County, Frederick County, whatever, these cornfields were in perfect alignment with their corn shocks. It's amazing. It wasn't scattered about. They're all just like a checkerboard. It's amazing to me. So there we're zeroing in on this topo map, today's topo map, zooming in on the site of the Indian village. So in 2018, I heard that this property, even though it was in the boundaries of the national park, was going to be sold and developed. And I knew it was an Indian site there. And the property owner, who is a good friend of mine, in fact, he sold me the property, Mark and I the property later, allowed us to go in and do some excavation work, because I wanted to show that you should not build right here where this Indian village site is, because there was graves here in 1924. It was documented in the paper, and they plowed up some Indian skeletons, 7 as a matter of fact, and you shouldn't be putting houses there. So he let us excavate there, but he was still going to sell it, of course. And what this is, what's called shovel test pits, STPs. And we did them on a grid, just like the corn shocks, maybe, every 25 or 50 feet on a grid. And you do that until you hit a negative STP, 2 in a row. And we did, that's 7 acres, we did 250 STPs in there. And all but maybe 20 or 30 were were positive. So that means it was a very, very intense camp, or very rich camp. See what time? I'll wind this up shortly. So March of 2019, we started doing the STPs. It was cold, and we finished it up by June. By the next year, remember COVID? It was, well, in the summer, by that time we had all been trapped. We all wanted to get out. And I called Mark Ludlow up and I said, Mark, you think we could get out and do some work out there in that field? He said, I need to get out. He said, we'd love to. So it was in summer. And we did get out, and we were isolated in space, each person to a hole, but we followed protocol. We all got it sooner or later anyway, but at that time it got us through. But anyway, between 2019 and 2021, we did do 2 years of work out there and found quite a bit. This would be a test square, and this is on the right is a STP. And the soils range from 9 inches to 18 inches in topsoils. And that's what we found. One STP, we got into really deep soil, so we knew it was probably a good place to put in a unit. And we were actually trying to find some evidence of human remains so that it wouldn't be developed, because that could stop it. And we never did, but we did come across an interesting feature, which is this dark soil. It's a huge fire pit. It might have been on a longhouse. And we excavated the topsoil away from it. You could see some post holes right there. No pattern that we could determine. And then this is the pit. Went down 28 inches down in the ground. And that's the sidewall. It's 3 feet across. It was just full of pottery, bones, deer bones, animal bones, turtle, some points. They even found some pieces of pipe. All their refuse was thrown in there. But what was, to me, the most interesting thing was we found right in that section there, only further into, I don't have very good pictures. Mark's got a lot better pictures. We found a lot of charred corn. It would filled up a gallon. And there was a big broken clay pot there that was broken. So whatever was charred was probably in that pot. And on top of it was, we were going through it, and you make mistakes. You learn from your mistakes. So first time we went through it, I said, well, that's charcoal. And then I started noticing it had a shape to it. And I said, these are poles. These are sticks. Excuse me. These are, it's just not burnt pieces of wood that don't have any shape to it. And I started thinking, it's about that 1.5 inches, 2 inches. I said, this might be the wigwam poles. Now, this is stretching it, but I'm thinking that maybe this wigwam caught on fire from the cooking, something got out of hand. I don't know. Could be a crime scene, but anyway, I think that the wigwam caught on fire. And there's something I've read somewhere that I haven't been able to find it in the back of my head, but I don't know if it was Wayland, if it was Kirchville, or somebody said that there was an Indian village attacked at the mouth of Cedar Creek and burned. I'd like to come across that again. Maybe I dreamed it, but who knows? By the way, the carbon dating on this site is 1350. So that's a little over 100 years before Columbus. Now, one of the reasons we didn't find a lot in the topsoil or whatever, the soil is so rich, so deep. I understand why the farmer wanted to plow it deep. But what he did, we couldn't find any place in the plow zone, or any place that was not disturbed by the plow, because if it was hard, the plow, he had a tractor, Robert Baker. He had one of the first tractors in the area, and he plowed the heck out of that place. And the plow would just go along and would go wherever was on the topsoil would go to the subsoil, and it would hit hard pan, and everything else is just turned up. So you can see the plow marks. See them right there? These are what they call plow scars. So we knew that anything above those plow scars had been disturbed. Anything below them, that's what you're looking for. That's part of that feature that we did not, most of the feature has not been excavated yet. We got the information that we wanted. We also were able to save the property because the property owner came to us one day and wanted to know if we wanted to buy it, and we did. And there's some of the burned maize or charcoal, corn. A whole pot full of it. There's some of the points that we found on the site when we were digging. Some of them go back to archaic time period. These are Yadkin points, 1500, which is just about right for the carbon dating. And then my daughter's always getting in front of the camera for some reason. To me, this is amazing. Is this old tree that was down below the Indian site there. Part of it had fallen apart, and this was 2022. It has now completely fallen. It's on the ground. I'd like to get it, dendrochronology done on it. There's actually 2 other trees still standing, though, that are probably contemporary with this one. And I'd like to get it dated because they could go back that far. I mean, how many times, I haven't seen that many oaks that are as old as this one. I think we measure it like 20 feet in circumference. I've been cutting it up for firewood. I'll never. And of course, this is the river right below where the encampment was. So they were up on a ridge. They probably, at this time, we don't know if it was a Palisade village or not because we didn't excavate that much. But what we did find is that we got a date on it. We were able to keep it from being developed, from housing, and it's saved for the future. So the practice of archaeology is don't try to remove everything. Save something for the future because technology always gets better and you can learn more. So I'm going up there March a year ago up on the hill, and this tree had fallen. And so I got out to move the tree, and right here in front of me, I saw this little white rock. And it was about 20 yards in front. I spotted it way off, really stuck out. Turned out to be a LaCroix point. So today when I find things, I'll GPS it, locate it where it was, the time period, and if I hadn't taken it, it would have probably gotten broken or washed away or something. So I do try to locate specifically where these items come from. Same thing, going back to the place I referred to earlier as the men's club. They timbered that. I went in and found a couple more points, and I'm now using GPS to show where they came from. And some other technology that is really good today. I had so many pictures I could have shown tonight, but I knew it was going to take forever. But this is what's called a nutting stone. And maybe you can see the indentation in it. Well, I made that. I've been cracking walnuts, and the wife said, it works perfectly. Everybody says you use a nutcracker, use a nutcracker. Well, that works really good. Okay. So, we're back to where we started. Except today, they're hang gliding off signal knob. This actually surprised me because Carl Brown is a pretty well-known folk artist, I'll say it, around Strasburg. And so I had the one painting that I had paid too much for. And I'm in the Strasburg Museum the other day. There's this one. So that's it.